Welcome to another episode of CFB Only. I am your host, Deep Shot Garry. It is 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. Thank you for being here. Episode 13, I believe. I believe that's what's on the thumbnail. Thanks again. Really excited for this episode. I'm going to be talking about, I did the best games of September last episode. We're also going to do now the best games of October as we stand here in mid-May. We've got Tennessee, thoughts on their program. I posted something on the Instagram today. I'm just kind of giving general thoughts on how we feel about the Tennessee football program. And we're going to start off with this one, actually. We're going to talk about the best college football teams to never win a national championship. So we've got all that coming up for you here in just a second. Before we do, as always, I'm going to ask that you follow Deep Shot Sports on Instagram, on TikTok. Subscribe to YouTube. Subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe if you're listening on Spotify. It would do me very well. It would really help me out. It would really help the page out. We are building to almost 6,000 followers on Instagram, which is just crazy to think about. So I appreciate everybody who has been locked in and has been paying attention. We've got great content on there week to week, day to day, and you're not going to regret it. So remember, follow Instagram, TikTok, subscribe on everything you're watching as well. Greatest teams to never win a national championship. All right. First things first. These are all teams that may have made the national championship, but didn't get there or did not win it. All right. So you think about some of the great teams that you're probably already thinking about in your head. All right. Now, these teams had great players. They had great coaches. They did almost everything right, but they couldn't grab the glory at the end of the season, and that is the national championship trophy. So, without further ado, greatest teams to never win a national championship. You see it on the screen right now. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on podcast, you can hear it or you can get ready to hear it. All right. Number 5, I've got 2019 Clemson. Now, 2019 Clemson went on a 29-game win streak before they lost to LSU, the eventual national champions, in the national title game. They had guys like Trevor Lawrence, had guys like Travis, or is it Travis or Trevor? Which on one of the ETNs, I'm forgetting about it. Both running backs, guys like Christian Wilkins, Dexter Lawrence, Hunter Renfrow, they were all on this team. Other than almost losing to UNC, they beat them 21-20. I think in week 5 of the season. Every other game, they won by 14 plus. Coming off a national championship the year before, and when they won that, they beat Alabama 44-16. This was one of the better teams, and they just ran into the buzzsaw that was the LSU Tigers in 2019, as I'm sure we all remember, not making this list because they did win the national championship. So 2019 Clemson, I saw a lot of people when I was looking at potential names for this list that said, why not 2019 Ohio State? Well, 2019 Clemson actually beat Ohio State, so that kind of does it for me. So I've got 2019 Clemson as my number 5 spot. At the number 4, I've got 2008 Texas, Colt McCoy, Jordan Shipley, those guys, Brian Orakpa, if I said that name right, defensive player. Only loss they had this season was to Texas Tech. If you don't remember the crazy game where Mike Crabtree catches on the sideline, runs in with 1 second, that Mike Leach squad, they beat them, or they lose to them. They end up in a 3-way tie between them, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma in the Big 12 South back in the day. Texas actually beat Oklahoma that year. Oklahoma ends up playing for the national championship, ends up playing for the Big 12 championship as well because of a 3-way tiebreaker. They end up playing for the national championship, and they lose to Florida, if you remember that season. But look, this Texas team, they averaged 42.4 points a game. And we're just in a juggernaut offensively. Well, those were the Mac Brown days. They ended up playing for a national championship, I believe, the next year with Colt McCoy as quarterback. So we all remember those teams. That's going to be my number 4 spot. At number 3, I got 2004 Auburn. undefeated SEC champ. This team was undefeated. They won every single game they played. They won the SEC. They had guys like Cadillac Williams, Ronnie Brown, Jason Campbell. They beat teams like LSU, Tennessee twice, Georgia, Bama. The only thing that basically stopped them was the BCS system that so many people wanted to get rid of for such a long time after this. They were like 17th or 18th to start the season. Texas and Oklahoma and USC, who played for the national championship, they started out in like the top 5, and they never were. They were also undefeated, and they basically just got beat out on the point system. In the college football playoff that we have today, that obviously would never happen. USC ended up beating Oklahoma that year 55-19 in the national championship. So who knows, would Auburn been able to beat USC? Maybe, but would they have been able to score more than 19 points? Maybe. Guess we'll never know. That happens to be the number 3 team on the list. All right, number 2, I've got 2011 LSU. LSU went 13-0 in the regular season. If you don't remember, this was the team that beat Bama in the regular season 9-6 in a game that featured only field goals. They beat everybody else by 2+ scores. They had guys like Tyrann Mathieu, Morris Claiborne, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry. They ended up losing 21-0 to Bama in the national championship game. Other than that, they pretty much dominated every game other than the 9-6 game against Bama. Bama ends up sneaking in after not playing for the SEC championship because of a loss that Oklahoma State took late in the year. It kind of bumped Bama back in, still in that BCS era, and LSU ends up not winning the national championship because they had to play same team again for the championship. And in my number 1 spot, I've got 2005 USC. This team had guys like Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, Lindale White, was won 34 games in a row at one point. They had won back-to-back national championships. They were scoring 50 points a game. They were a dynasty in college football, and the only thing that stopped them was a Vince Young legacy game in the Rose Bowl, which I'm sure no matter what age you are, you probably have seen that. So that's my top 5. Let me know what you think in the comments below. All right, next segment. I've been talking about the best games in September last episode. Now I'm going to talk about the best games in October. Again, it is mid-May. Things can change. But as of right now, this is what I've got going on for the best games in October. All right, first one on the list. We start in week 5. Now, week 5, as of right now, kind of looks like a little bit of a dud. We've got Miami and Clemson written down as our first one on the list. This is going to be Miami's first real game. They actually, I think I've talked about this before, but Miami doesn't play a real game on Saturday until week 4. And so this will be their second Saturday game of the season. In week 5, they're going to play at Clemson. It'll probably be the most hostile game they have until they play Notre Dame later in the season. This is probably going to be their toughest, and we know Clemson's not that great of a team at this moment and where they are in their program. But in terms of the ACC and what implications this could have, this is probably one of the bigger games. Some honorable mentions. I didn't really put these on the list, but Ohio State is playing at Iowa that week. Washington playing at USC. Auburn playing at Tennessee. Bunch of games that could have some little impact in terms of conference races, but I just don't think we'll have that much. So now we're going to move on to week 6. So I turn my light on in the background. Georgia at Bama. This is the first one I've got on the list. Look, we know every time these two teams play, it is a movie. It is an absolute great game, other than the SEC championship that we saw. But look, the last 2 games in the regular season at Bama and in Athens have come down to the wire, had insane finishes. These two teams, every time they match up, it is something to watch. In terms of where these two teams will be standing, I'm obviously pretty high on Georgia. We'll see where Alabama's going to be standing towards later at this point in the season. They've got a fairly easy schedule. They play teams like Florida State. They play teams like South Carolina. But we'll see. I would assume both these teams should at least be 4-1, probably 5-0 at this point in the season. 7, Notre Dame at BYU. This is probably one of the biggest games in BYU's home history. I don't think they've ever played Notre Dame at home. So this is going to be another situation where you could see probably both these teams being undefeated and needing this win to really stamp what they were proving to the playoff committee, to really the whole country. And also in week 7, we've got Ohio State at Indiana, the rematch of the Big Ten championship game. This one is at Indiana. A couple years ago when Indiana was first coming on the scene, we remember the two teams they played at Ohio State. So this one's going to be at Indiana, probably going to be the biggest home game in Indiana football history. You would assume both these teams are probably going to be top 10. Ohio State has to play Texas early in the season, so they could lose that. Indiana, there's not really a chance they're probably going to lose a game early in their schedule. So this has massive implications on it. In terms of some honorable mentions I put down for week 7, I had none in week 6, but week 7, we've got teams like FSU playing at Miami. Penn State is playing at Michigan in week 7. Arizona State is playing at Texas Tech as well. So I think those are some pretty good games to watch out for as well. I wouldn't put on marquee at this time though. We keep it going. We get to week 8. Ole Miss at Texas. I think this is one of the games that not a lot of people are thinking about at this point in the season, at this point in the offseason in mid-May. But once we get to October, you're going to start circling this game, because I'm a proponent that Texas is going to be very good. In terms of Ole Miss, I think they should be good, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they kind of rolled over, if they, were an 8-4 team, or if things, maybe Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss really had the grips on this team. I know they won a playoff game against Georgia. I know they almost beat Miami. It's been a whole offseason. Things could get a little different. Pete Golding may not be the head coach material that they need through a whole season. Who knows? But they also could be. They also could be really good. And we all think Texas is going to be good. So I think this is a huge marquee matchup. Week 8, especially in terms of the SEC standings. Another game I've got in week 8 is Houston at Utah. Houston is one of my sleeper teams in the Big 12. Utah obviously has a brand new coaching staff, but they should be up top and towards Big 12 standings. If you look at the odds for who's winning Big 12, it's Texas Tech, and then BYU, Utah, and Houston are all kind of jumbled up right there. Teams like Arizona State. But I think this one late in the season, Houston plays Texas Tech early in the season in week 3. Talked a little bit about that last week. This is going to be a game where it's probably going to decide who's right there in the Big 12 standings. All right. If Utah's got to play BYU, Houston's got to play Texas Tech. They're both going to have chances to beat the other top tier teams. But this is when it looks like who's going to get that second spot, who's going to take first spot in the Big 12. So in terms of Big 12 matchups, this is an absolutely huge one. All right. And then, shout out to the chat. The volume is too low. We can barely hear you. Thank you, 2 Glock 30CS. Let me see if I can get this turned up for you guys. All right. Let's see. Let me know if that is better. 2 Glock 30S. Appreciate it. All right. Also, some honorable mentions that I have in week 8 is Texas A&M at Alabama. That is probably going to end up being a huge one. But as of right now, I'm going to resist that it's that big at the moment. But they also got games like Texas Tech at Cincinnati. Who knows? Brendan Sorsby could end up being eligible based on all these things that are going on recently. And if he is, then that's he's playing against his old team. Also, Indiana is playing at Michigan in week 8 as well. We'll see how good Michigan is going to be. But for now, we're just going to assume that's not a marquee game. Also, 2 Glock 30S. I meant to preference that. I had it on the graphic, but it was the best team since 2000 that had never won a national championship. So that's on me. Appreciate you looking out. All right. Best game in week 9. I've got only one listed here, and it's Ohio State at USC. I've said some nice things about Ohio State. Obviously, I've said nice things about USC, and I think that this is going to be a huge matchup in the Big Ten, because I think at most these teams have maybe 2 losses, and these 2 teams are going to be fighting for a potential Big Ten championship spot. And this late in the season in November, Ohio State's going to go to the West Coast. I think this is a huge marquee matchup. matchup. And in terms of honorable mentions for week 9, again, not really looking at mid-May like it's that big of a deal in some of these, but I've got Georgia, Florida, Clemson, Florida State, things like that. So those are my best games of October as we stand right now. All right. Last thing I want to talk about tonight is my thoughts on Tennessee. And I put out a post today on Instagram that I'll put up here in just a second. But obviously, Tennessee last year, they had the whole Nico Amalivia situation. He boots out, goes to UCLA. They have to bring in Joey Aguilar, right? They end up going 8-4, losing their bowl game. So I believe they finished 8-5. They lost pretty much every good team they played, they lost to. They lost to Georgia. They lost to Alabama. They lost to Vanderbilt. I'm blanking on the other team they lost to. Oklahoma. They lost to pretty much. Now, you could say those are all losses to what? 3 playoff teams and a fringe playoff team, and then they lose to Illinois in the bowl game, which, you can say bowl games count. You can say they don't count, whatever you want to say. But either way, Tennessee kind of went into last season kind of shuffling the decks, being like, okay, well, we thought we were going to have this quarterback that we had. Now we have this brand new quarterback. He's playing the system. Now, look, he played fine. Threw for a lot of yards, did what they needed to do. They had an awful defense, though. I mean, their defense let them down time and time again. Joey Aguilar was very prone to turnovers. So there was a lot of problems. So now I propose this question on the Instagram today. Tennessee is now a year removed from the Nico situation. Now that Heupel has a full offseason with his quarterbacks, along with a new defensive coordinator and Jim Knowles, are the Vols playoff contenders. So, remember, 2024, Tennessee goes to the playoffs with Nico Amalivia. They have one of the better defenses in the country. And look, they go to Ohio State, they get waxed. So did almost everybody else that played Ohio State. Now, they bring in Jim Knowles, like I mentioned. They also took Indiana's strength coach, which, hold on, want to know his name, Derek Owings from Indiana. He is now one of the highest paid strength coach in college football because he came from Indiana, and Tennessee just kind of ripped him away from him. All right. They have a new quarterback situation, obviously. They've got 2 guys between George McIntyre and Faison Brandon, who are 2 guys that they brought in over in just recruiting. These are their guys, Heupel's guys, that they're gonna produce out of them. And that's one thing that Heupel has been able to do really well in his tenure, right? We think about Joey Aguilar last year. Like, he was a guy that was supposed to go to UCLA, basically made a trade for him. He comes in there. I'm pretty sure he led the SEC in passing yards. He does very well. All right. All things considered. Year before that, they have Nico Amalivia. Look, it wasn't the, $1 million, $8 million, whatever he was freaking making. But, I mean, going into last season, we still kind of had high regards for Nico and thought he was going to turn out to be something well. Sure, he goes to UCLA, kind of busts the bed. But, I mean, that's kind of his own problem and not really Josh Heupel's. And either way, they make the playoffs. So they got what they needed out of him, right? Year before that, they have Joe Milton. Joe Milton, who pretty much could not get anything done at Michigan, comes to Tennessee, does pretty well there. And then we all remember Hendon Hooker, right? Hendon Hooker goes out there. They have one of the most explosive offenses. That's when they beat Alabama, all of that stuff, and, kind of put Tennessee on the map as, kind of being back. So all those things considered, we all know Josh Heupel is a quarterback guru, knows how to handle quarterbacks. The question is, will he have the same situation with the quarterbacks he's bringing in, with George McIntyre, or will it be Faison Brandon? They're addressing big things in the secondary and on the defense as well. Like, Jim Knowles is a huge pickup for them. Jim Knowles was off the defensive coordinator at Ohio State 2 seasons ago when they won a national championship. Then Penn State rips him. James Franklin goes and gets him, rips him from Ohio State. He's at Penn State last season. We all know what happened to Penn State last year. They kind of crumble. Things don't work out really well for them. But at the same time, he's still a good defensive coordinator, one of the highly touted ones. So Tennessee has went out there and got one of the better defensive coordinators, one of the better strength coaches. All right, they fixed things on the defense. They've brought in pieces like Quay Moss, Dejon Lane to kind of help out in the secondary. They brought in a guy like Chaz Coleman. I know there's something going on with him down there at Tennessee, like mental health or whatever. But If he can get things going, he's a top-tier player for them as well. But they've made massive, massive moves this offseason. And Tennessee is a fan base that is one of the loudest in college football. One of the proudest of their teams. I know they haven't accomplished much in terms of winning SEC championships or winning playoff games or yada yada yada, but they act like they have, and they act like they deserve to. And I'll just say, we all remember Tennessee, the Butch Jones era, everything before that, the Derek Dooley, the Jeremy Pruitt, like everything, like it wasn't going so well. And now it's like, okay, we're having conversations about Tennessee. And if the defense gets fixed up, and if it's going back to where they were playing elite ball in 2024, even with, the offense is supposed to be the thing, right? Well, in 2024, it was Dylan Sampson and the defense, and that's how they kind of got moving. If they can get back to an established run game, if they can get what they need out of either of these two quarterbacks, they still have really good receivers. All right. They've got guys like Deshaun Bishops, proven receivers like, running back like Deshaun Bishops, proven receivers like Braylon Stanley and Mike Matthews. They can do some damage. Now, they have an SEC schedule, but so do SEC teams. They've got big games. They've got Texas at home. They've got Alabama at home. I'm just asking, is this possible for Tennessee to kind of flip the switch immediately and get right back to where they were in 2024? Can they be a 10-2 team, and can they go to the playoffs? That's basically the question here. All right. He's been 45-20 in 5 years as the head coach. I think that sounds right. He's got 7 returning starters on the offense. I believe 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen from last year are returning. So there's some continuity there. And the things that are being changed were the things that were problems last year. So, they probably need to make sure that kicker doesn't miss kicks against Georgia anymore. We think about that. We think about when they played Alabama and they have a first and goal or second and goal, and Joey Aguilar throws a pick 6 and kind of costs them. You think about the Oklahoma game where they have the fumble that gets just ripped from the hands and returned for a touchdown. Like, they kind of put themselves in a lot of situations where it wasn't like they were just getting, just physically manhandled and beat, across the board against these teams. Now, you look at the Vanderbilt game, they just got absolutely smoked. It was over. Season's over. That's kind of the part of this 12-team playoff. Once you're out, you're out. But those other games, they were right back in them. They could easily have won the Georgia game. Alabama probably would have took a little bit more, but they were right there. Oklahoma game, same thing, right there. They almost ended up coming back at the end. This is a team, if some things just flip, if they just go the other way, if the ball, everyone, you always hear it, if the ball just bounces the other way, Tennessee could be put in a really good situation. So that's my kind of thoughts on Tennessee right now. Like, I'm, oddly optimistic about what they can do. I think there's a chance. that if everything kind of goes their way, and if they win some games, they're probably not going to be favored to win, and they pull off a couple upsets at home, that there's a chance that they could go to the playoffs this season. And I'm a fan of Josh Heupel. I have asked the question before, though, like, is he just, if Tennessee gets to this point where like they're like a Penn State, or they're kind of just sitting around and, doing the small things and winning, 8 to 9 games, like how is that going to work? And I've heard a lot of, people talk about that. And I just think this guy has got something going. And if you look at last season objectively, and you don't just try to shit on Tennessee, then you can see that there's probably a light pretty close, and you're kind of at the end of the tunnel, and it's right there. So that's kind of my thoughts on Tennessee as we head into 2026. All right. That is the show. Hopefully I was able to kind of fix the sound problem. I was kind of freaking out about that at the beginning if you didn't hear me stuttering, but either way, these things happen when you're producing your own show, trying to do everything quickly. Either way, thank you guys for listening to another episode of CFB Only, episode 13. We'll be back again next Tuesday at 7 p.m. On episode 14, and we'll probably be talking about best games in November, probably be talking about another specific school, probably doing a top 5 of some sort. Maybe some big headline comes out and we have something else to talk about. But until then, again, I just want to follow Deep Shot Shot Sports on Instagram and TikTok. Subscribe to YouTube. Join the chat when we're in here. Thank you. Again, if you already did that, and I will see you guys next week. Have a good Tuesday night. Have a good rest of your week. Enjoy Memorial Day weekend. Deep Shot out.